like when I do things,
Morning, afternoon, whatever time of day it is.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I just came inside. So I thought, well, Mitch just told me more about what we're doing today. I was like, I'm about to talk to Rochelle. What am I supposed to expect? And he sends me your link, and I'm like, wait, this is like recorded? And
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I was like, other than just a casual conversation, maybe
well, it is a casual.
Well, sure, but more than just like qualitative data collection.
Nope.
Sorry, I'm trying to get highlighting.
No. None of that. We're going to talk about diversity. So, what's happening in the world around us for Black and Brown people, and that kind of thing. So, I promise it will be painless. I try to make these as painless as possible. But yep, exactly. You see, I got my
right. I was outside. The boys were playing basketball. We had the fan going, so I was like, "Oh wait, this isn't the right setting. Boys inside. Let's rethink what was just about to happen here." So anyway.
So let's do this officially. So I ask you two questions to start. I ask you to tell us your name and share anything about yourself that'll help us get to know you a little bit better. So please tell us your name.
All right, Akua Carraway. I am a mother, a wife, an educator by passion. We say that education is our family business, and so a lifelong learner. And my work so far has been tightly connected to both my love of sciences and math, as well as education and making opportunities for kids to learn. So that's kind of me.
That sounds like a
lot. Okay. Second question. Sorry, remind me.
Just whatever you want to share about us, share about you, that would help us get to know you. But I think you kind of covered that just now when you were telling us about your loves and passions and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So my journey to where I am, was a mathematics major, both in undergrad and graduate school, applied mathematics, and went into that world for work, but felt a little unfulfilled in some aspects, and coming over into education, not in the typical fashion of being a in-classroom teacher, but more on the support side and programs and supportive conversations around community. And the value of having multiple stakeholders at the table and talking about and having interest in education, and why that's important, both to push our ideas around what does education look like and what does it mean for everyone. And that's where I've been for the last 9 to 10 years, and have really felt like my now professional life aligns more with my own passions. And so, yeah, that's where I am.
It's all very good. So what does it mean to be a math major and someone who's having these community conversations? How do you correlate those two things?
So the fact that I became a math major isn't necessarily, I really thought ultimately I was going to be in research and, be applying this in that type of fashion. And mainly that was because growing up, I had a lot of influential voices between teachers and Saturday programs, summer programming, and many of them wrapped around what we now know as STEM fields. And I loved all of it. And that's essentially where I thought I would be. And I enjoyed math. That was the one homework assignment I didn't run from. I welcomed more and extra work. And so that, fueled that decision to do that. I always knew friends who were, I'm not a math person. I don't understand it. It's not for me. And saw that thought, and even teachers who didn't know how to reach that particular student impede their ability to do things they may have had interest in. I would have been a marine biologist, but I didn't understand this. I wasn't good at this, and therefore I went a completely different track. And I just think that we're doing a disservice if the one reason you can't, reach some goal for yourself or follow a passion that you have is a stumbling block that may not necessarily be there. It may just be that you didn't find an educator that reached you in a way that made sense for you. So when in school and, even as an undergrad, I would tutor younger kids in elementary and middle in that community. I went to Hampton University, so in the Hampton Roads area. And in graduate school, being in classrooms, first year grad student being told to teach incoming freshmen pre-calculus and algebra, and knowing those conversations we had about math person, not math person, I just need to get through this, all of that. So seeing that, and then later as an adult, hearing the conversation as parents, I don't understand what I'm trying to teach my child. I don't understand the new math, talking about, like Common Core and things like that. Now, some of this stuff has been politicized, but ultimately math and sciences are so intertwined within what we do, how we do things, especially as a society, as things become more technology-based. Just a basic understanding of how things work in engineering and math is important. Understanding science is important. I mean, we talk about the idea and understanding of pandemic that's going on right now, just understanding the validity of what science means and what research is being done to understand the things that happen in our world is an important thing, even for any lay person. So when we're sitting around tables discussing, how it might be important or why it's important to have various stakeholders around the table interested in what kids are learning, how kids are learning, it's because it's not just, some of these things aren't just for, those kids are on the college track, or we're going to somehow separate the things that all of our children should know. I think it's become more important to understand that we all benefit from a well-educated society.
Right.
And all of that, whatever that means. And what that means is what we're trying to define. Mm-hmm. And some folks think that, some of those things don't include some of the sciences, mathematical sciences included, and I disagree. And so we're having those deep discussions about why that is the case and how we reach all kids, knowing that, no, sure, we're not going to have a full society full of surgeons and, chemical engineers, no, but a basic understanding of our world and how it functions, and being able to allow everyone to know that they can be at the table to have those conversations and learn about it is top priority.
That makes sense. So, as you well know, early in our careers, elementary education, girls and some people of color are discouraged from math and science and these kind of tracks. And so we have what we have in our society right now, are pretty much white male dominated science, the whole STEM track. And for those of you who do not know what STEM is, science, technology, engineering, and math / medicine now. Like, as you think about that, why do you think it is still such that the numbers still would suggest that Black and brown people enroll into STEM programs in higher education, and then before they reach their junior year, they've dropped or changed majors?
So that's a heavy one. So there are a number of discussions around this at various levels of education, both in the K-12 space as well as institutes of higher education and beyond, because I think what you've just referenced is seen. You start to see some of those trends or evidence of that potential trend early. And you're seeing the impact of those trends, of course, at the postdoctoral level and research. So you have foundations who are even having this conversation around funding of research and being able to find a diverse pool of researchers in sciences, biomedical, and other, funding their research that don't fit the profile you just said. And so many folks are having the discussion and having to peel back the onion to find why that is. And it's not a simple answer because it didn't start Number one, in our timeline of being here. It started well before that, and the solution isn't necessarily a one fix, and it's nothing that any one of those institutions can do by themselves. So this is something that, elementary, middle school, and K-8, high school has to attack in their own right. Institutes of higher education have to attack, and then we have to provide and be knowledgeable about the importance and value of mentorship in that postdoctoral and advancing into higher degrees. So you're going toward a PhD or a master's, and having the impact of having that mentorship relationship is very important and seems to be part of the Great Divide. And when you're looking at what are some of the reasons that this gap exists there. Messaging as well. I know that representation matters. And so if everyone, just as simple, even within my own family, I'm very aware that a doctor, my children's pediatrician, going to various different, pharmacies to get medication, different things, are they seeing people who look like them in any of these spaces? Because if they're not, without even communicating it directly, I'm in essence telling them, this space doesn't belong to you. This isn't a path that's for you, because I've never seen anyone that looks like me there. So even in just that simple interaction, or just a selection of, who they see in their own community, I think impacts. So as parents, number one, in a community, being aware of that, and the unintentional messaging, I think, is important as well. Personally, growing up, my mother was in a generation that dealt with a lot of this, and it wasn't always, it was very direct in nature, right? We're dealing with some of this that's a little bit more undercover. So I think that she, at that point, there was this very intentional, woman of color, and a business admin is about the highest that you might go. No need to take the math, no need to busy yourself in science and things. You need to learn to type, you need to do, so she was funneled in one way. Later in life, after high school, realizing there was more opportunity out there and wanting to attack it, she had to make extra steps to get there where other folks were just ready to go. So in raising two brown girls, she was very intentional about the things that we saw and the experiences that we had at hand. So from very beginning, we were in programs where we saw scientists that looked like us. We saw professors. We were on college campuses and Saturday programs and summer experiences in labs, wearing coats, curing cancer at age 12. All of these things that allowed us to think that we belonged in these spaces and to believe that, and to not have that kind of unintentional messaging come through. And I think that matters. And I think that's how many of us in this work are approaching our work, around being intentional about the messages we intend and don't intend, and creating spaces to have that as in a broader context and conversation, as well as make plans. Sorry, I'm gonna take this down. To make sure that we're providing a space for the next generation to have better than we did.
So that was a lot, but let me redirect you back to what my question was. So if you take, for example, I'm a technologist. I've been working in technology more than 40 years. In 2015, Google released its facial recognition software. And whenever it encountered a skin color that was not white or very, very light, it put up a picture of a gorilla. And I tell people this all the time. There was nothing about what Google did, I believe, was intentional. I don't think they just sat down and said, let me just alienate half of my community or a third of my community. I think the problem is that having diverse people working in these industries are really what's key to having more people that look like you, to having more opportunities to advance and to have more of a community. So where I work at, often I am the only person who looks like me in the meeting. Often when I go to a conference, my outspokenness brings attention to me because I'm not so willing to be docile and whatever it is that we're supposed to be in these spaces, because I know what I know and I'm pretty good at what I know. So I'm just not going to let you push me aside, because as you said earlier, my messages were intentional. They were not unintended messages. When I was in high school, I can remember my biology teacher told me I should get pregnant and drop out of school, you know. And so, you know, this is in the early 70s. So you know where that time was. But no one believed that a Black woman would be a contributor to the STEM thing. So I think I've told you this story before, but you know, so I've just been accepted to school. Same with you, with a math background and all this stuff. Geometry was my area of expertise. I like spaces and shapes. And on my way into the process to fill out all the forms, a white guy was standing there with a kiosk, and not like what we see today, but you're just literally a table. And he was standing out there, and he says to me, we are interested in bringing Negroes into computers. Neither one of those words resonated with me, because I had been called the other N word so often that Negroes was a proper term that had not been a part of my vocabulary, so I didn't know what that meant. And then when he said computers, that was a whole nother thing that I didn't know what it meant. And my first instinct was to keep walking, because I thought it was just another one of these white people trying to make me feel bad about myself. And he said, and we'll pay you $30,000 a year. This is in 1976. I won the lottery. I took the job. I did not get any formal education. You know, I didn't get my first college degree until I was 40, in my 40s. I don't know whether it's 42 or 45, but somewhere around there. And I have never gotten a degree in STEM. It never made sense to me to have a degree in STEM, because what I knew about technology is the copy and paste. Every part of technology is just built on another layer of technology. You know, there are some new things that are coming along, but for the most part, it's there. And so for women and people of color, STEM is still a goal that's far away, right? And so the work that you do in your community that you're building, how do you envision bringing together people so that they see the value of Black and brown minds in these areas? Because, you know, even today, girls are told that they aren't smart enough to do math or whatever it is. You know, you need to go the humanities track, or you need to do this. You know, there's this. But how do you see your work and your efforts changing that dialogue?
Gosh, I'm just reeling a little bit from your example. Well, just not your testimony, rather. So part of the work that I'm specifically doing is around instructional practice. And the idea of knowing that all kids, so regardless of anyone's implicit bias or otherwise, if you're an educator, the hope is that you believe that all people, all kids can learn. And so if you start the discussion there, before we even get into the politics, what I am and what I don't believe, do you believe that all kids have the ability to learn? If that answer is yes, then number one, I would assume, because you're an educator, that you believe it's yes, but we can start there and we can build from there. And then from there, it's just a matter of reaching those children and understanding that one's experiences outside of the classroom matter to how they understand what you're trying to teach in it. Mm-hmm. So if your experiences or the way in which you're providing content are attached to your own experiences in that very closed bubble that might be, mm-hmm. you are likely excluding students who have a very different life experience and condition. So if your testing questions, for instance, are setting the scene on a yacht and attaching an experience to that yacht on the open water out in the ocean, and we're extrapolating data from this experience to then answer these questions or connect the content, you may have lost a child who A, has never been on open water, B doesn't understand what you mean by a yacht. Is that closer to a rowboat or a canoe? So I'm already confused, and you've already shifted and separated your audience in that way. And I think that the impacts of that have allowed people to believe somehow that, oh, girls don't understand this, okay? Or people of color, they don't really get into the sciences. Maybe it's something internally with what they just don't understand it. So maybe we need to push them more toward the arts, humanities, or other fields, because this is just too, high. It's just too above their cognitive ability. And that inherently we know is wrong, right? So we have that understanding. The problem is, I think that people have seen that too long, that they actually have some idea that that's the truth. And then you look out in the fields and you see evidence or impacts of that, that type of belief over time. Your experience, sadly, is not an isolated one. It's, though however many years ago, I think folks can still have very similar experience and do now, unfortunately. And I think the idea that many of us are the only ones in the room, and the fact that that stuff happens. I have many friends who are in various areas of science and education and law, professional areas, and it's quite prevalent. But I think the conversations we're having are allowing people to see that, and starting to have conversations around that. And I think those of us who are the only ones in the room are getting tapped a bit more than normal to be the voice to explain it, to provide additional context and understanding in these recent times. And I've talked to a number of people who are experiencing a little bit of fatigue around those conversations a little bit. But we all recognize the value of having those conversations because we've been trying to have them for so long. Mm-hmm. And it's important to highlight and to raise awareness to make change around it.
That's a very good point. But I think that, what America is, and this may be true more globally than just America, but what we are is a society that is based on inferior and superior, right? So just phenomenally that. And so for people who were coming to this country where indigenous people already existed, to seek freedoms and to avoid persecution, began persecuting and killing Black and brown people. They had gone to Africa or wherever they've gone and gotten them and brought them here. So we have this. And so you have, it's against the law to educate a Black person, a slave in person. So you can't do that. Economically, we have never been on the same footing. So all those plantations and all the money they made from cotton and all that stuff that they did has resulted in the wealth that we see in the white race now. And we still aren't in that same space. And so a lot of what I do, you mentioned mentoring. So I probably mentor about 40 or 50 women of all colors, about STEM and how to deal with situations that you experience in your workplace, right? So those micro and macro aggressions, those little faint comments that go by, like, well, why is your hair like that? And I don't know if you read or saw this, but 7 states have now passed the Crown Act, which allows Black women to wear their hair naturally, which when I first read that, I kind of like almost passed out. Like, what do you mean? How am I going to wear my hair? I'm going to wear my hair. But we had so long idolized what was white and supposedly right. We wanted our hair flat and straight and permed and all that stuff. And then we realized that the hair that we have on our head is beautiful, however it is. Even, I'm sure both of us haven't been to our hairdresser in a while. So we got what we got. We're still beautiful. We're still exceptionally beautiful, And so for somebody to try to take that away from you and constantly remind you that you're not equal, So, I applaud your background and your education and what you're doing. But I think what you said about your mother might be the answer. If someone along the way reinforced to you could. Whatever it was you wanted to do, you could. In many Black and brown homes, that voice of enforcement or reassurance does not exist, right? So you go into the classroom, your husband's a teacher, my husband's a teacher, you know, so we go into the classroom and you find little Johnny expelled or in school suspension, so he's missing academic time. And so trying to make up that learning and catch up and there's social promotion and all these other pieces that go along with this means that there is a part of us that we haven't been able to overcome. And I don't mean us as in Black people, I mean us as the United States and the world, you know, that we see each other so much by visual constructs instead of mental constructs, right? So, you know, that you are mathematically brilliant, you know, who is out there advocating for that? Who knows that? Where's your advocacy? Where are the people that are saying we need more people like Akua to be out here helping us get this thing straight in education, right? So I'm sure you saw the movie Hidden Figures, right? So how many of us knew that Black women were the reason why many of NASA's launches were successful? Because those stories aren't told. The stories are told of us having babies and, you know, whatever it is that we're doing, as opposed to stories that encourage us and advance us to the next level. So as you're going about your work and as you're going about the things that you're doing, and you have 2 sons, you know, and all this stuff, your job is twice as hard as your white peer, because not only do you have to make sure that your children hear over and over again that they can, then they have to do it. They have to be able to go and do it. And when they get in school, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but so we lived in Connecticut when Rochelle was in maybe the 5th, I don't know what grade she was in. She was in some grade. And one boy called her the N-word, right? So it was in a predominantly white area of Connecticut. And, you know, like, so what trauma did that have on my daughter? What did that tell my daughter? So my daughter is the same path as yours, right? So my daughter, you know, she's been gifted her whole life. You know, she's never gotten a B on anything, you know, and so she, you know, got a biology degree from Hampton, you know, and all of those kinds of things. But her struggle was still there, because no matter how smart she was, no matter how creative she was, no matter what she was able to do, her skin color had impacted her in ways that did not encourage her to stay on this track, if that makes sense to you. So the fact that you are able to stay on this track and are continuing to do that, your work is hard. And for your sons, you've got to pray that all the things that you've done to date to reinforce to them that they're powerful Black men, even though they're little young Black men, but powerful Black men don't get undone the minute they get into the academic environment, you know, because it happens all the time, you know. So I expect that, you know, your work is probably more advocacy than it is actually teaching and instruction, because you've got great teachers out there, you've got great professors out there, but the problem is so much trauma is done by the time they get to the next level. So from elementary, from 1st to 5th or 6th, whatever that is, middle school and then high school, each one of those years for Black and brown children leaves a scar. And so then I've got to go into this college and prove myself. And my colleagues are sitting around looking at me like, why are you here? You must be here because of affirmative action or something like that. So am I right? Am I on the right track, you know, there?
Yeah, when you're talking, especially about Rochelle, going to Hampton, HBCU, historically Black college university, there were a number of people there from various regions of the United States, majority Black and brown folks, but very different in background, experiences, and reasons for being at an HBCU. I went to a historically Black high school in our city, so I'd had pretty much an experience of being surrounded like an HBCU, you know, older teachers who, you know, kind of felt like grandparents and parents and extensions of a family.
Yep.
That carried through to an HBCU, but many of my classmates had not had an experience where they had had Black educators in many cases, or they were largely the only Black student in an entire graduating class, or one of few. So many of us were there for this experience, and I say us because I wanted an experience in college that was a unique one where else can you be where you don't feel like your outward experience, your outward appearance will inform your experience in that space. Right. So I knew if someone didn't like Akua, it was because something about me, they weren't leading with my who I was as a Black woman. I also didn't walk out of the door feeling like I was carrying the weight of all Black women by how I carried myself in that space. And I was just representing Akua. And likely my mom would say her and, all that, but I was myself, and having that burden lifted, not a burden, I want to say it like that, but having that responsibility lifted for those 4 years, right, was amazing. Seeing the diversity within ourselves in this little microcosm of our, Black population was brilliant and wonderful because, again, and for many people who hadn't been around that many Black people in this type of space, it gave everyone an idea of, we are so diverse in ourselves. We bring so many different talents and experiences to the table. It didn't feel like we were just in this Black college. It was this vibrant mosaic of so many different peoples and types. And we don't often get that privilege, right? Of just feeling like there is very, very few spaces where white Americans don't feel that. Right. And very few where we do. So whenever somebody asks me, well, why would you go to an HBCU? Why are you going to encourage your boys to go to Hampton University or another HBCU? That's why I tell them. Yeah. It is a very unique experience for Black American, and one I think we should all have, or at least have a connection to. Even if you didn't go to an HBCU, maybe you were in the same city as one and would come over for homecoming, or, just to kind of come to the family, come to the reunion, and, kind of release some of that and the comfortability of it and a bit of an education. You mentioned Hidden Figures, and just down the street, that history was there. And I didn't know about it in its depth until the movie came. Why? Why was that? We talk about Emancipation Oak and all the rich history that was right there on our campus. And a lot of that, and really the most rich history lesson I ever got, was in my freshman African American history studies classroom. And I just remember, knowing all of our stories don't begin with Harriet Tubman and end with Martin Luther King Jr., and just the diversity of the conversation of our own history and why everyone should know it, because it's our shared history. So all of those moments, and that feeds into who you are and helps you. But I'll be transparent. Going into PWI after that for graduate school, as strong as I felt walking out the door, it still hit me going into the other experience. And those little voice in the back, I don't know what it is, came right back in when you do look around and you see people looking at you like, oh, you're here because we needed to fill a brown quota this year, or so where's that college? And oh, we did X, Y, and Z. What did you do? Mm-hmm. And just the way that then makes you feel about maybe I'm not welcome here, and then starts to chip away at the strength that you'd worked so hard in building up into that point. So I definitely connect with the story that you shared about Rochelle. I remember the first time that someone called me the N-word, 4th grade, standing in line, heading out to the playground. And I remember being very confused. Because up until that point, you think, well, we're sharing the same class. I don't understand what you're trying to say or how you're trying to make me feel any different. Mm-hmm. And then extrapolating that experience on as you grow older and understanding more about not necessarily what that meant about her, but the family she came from, as to why, even if in 4th grade, 8 and 9 years old, we're having to have these conversations, or kids are having these conversations with one another. So, yes.
So we could probably spend a few years talking about education. So we're gonna let that one go. Let me ask you this question. So as the mother of 2 young Black men, so I have 2 Black children, and I've had my conversations with my children my whole life. When Everett was finally able to go off to school, was the first time I felt real fear, because from my front door to his front door was 48 miles on a highway. And so having this conversation with a 16-year-old about being Black in America, because, I think most Black parents, we try to lift our children up while they're in the nest, right? We try to give them all the tools that they need to go. So at home, I probably am the ultimate helicopter parent. At home, he had everything he needed. But now all of a sudden, he was going to get in his car and drive to a place, a predominantly white institution, where along the way, the blue lights might show up in his headlights, or he may experience some kind of thing. Because as far as I know, I don't think anyone has ever called Everett the N-word. He's never shared that with me. But that conversation, that fear for your child going and coming, returning home safely. And most of my white colleagues don't even think about this. When their kids go out partying or go to school, they don't even consider, is that child going to come home safely? What is going to be their experience when you have law enforcement? So as a Black mother, what conversations are you having? Because your sons are still very young, but what conversations are you preparing for them to go into a world that sees most Black people as inferior, or something is wrong with us and nothing is wrong with them?
Well, they're 9, and as of yesterday, 6.
Happy birthday.
Believe it or not. And some of those conversations are already happening because they have to, but not necessarily in a darker sense. It's kind of under the cover of just, this is what we need to be mindful of. The context behind why we're having some of those conversations will have to come when they can understand it a little bit better. But, just knowing the world and having this conversation with white friends and colleagues that don't understand it, I explain it a little bit like, okay, to your point, they're not thinking about, they don't have to think necessarily about the challenges between point A and point B, police, just a crowd of people who may not, or who feel threatened by you. But they have other things. So I said, well, imagine your child is in elementary school and you're going to allow them to walk to school. You would not do so without teaching them how to cross the street, or what street signs mean, what the 3 blinking 3 lights, red, yellow, green. You wouldn't let them do that without having a clear understanding of what all these signs mean and how to cross, where a crosswalk is, what a vehicle looks like. Also understanding where they're going and the address and where they came from, the addresses of their points of, so some type of orientation within the community they live and how to read the signs. And that's essentially what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Now, the example is, or the context of that is a little bit more complex than just reading street signs and vehicle behavior of drivers driving vehicles. We're trying to prepare them to anticipate, to essentially have psychology degrees at 10 to anticipate someone's reaction to you based on body language, tone of voice, and also trying to adjust your own to ensure that you leave this interaction alive.
Right.
It's this complex thing, scary, sad, but our current reality, and one I'm not going to ignore because I want to make sure my children are safe. Mm-hmm. I don't think we can afford to not have those discussions while at the same time doing the work it takes to ensure that potentially my grandchildren don't have to have that conversation, or my great-grandchildren. So those 2 things have to happen in tandem, and I don't think that one negates the other. That makes sense. I will say, and I wonder for you too, I know you're asking me the questions, but right now, they're the super cute, they're handsome boys, so well-mannered. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's it's an expectation that my children know how to address an adult. They know, how to behave in public and all that. So, okay. But also, when does that change? And I'm going to have big boys. My husband's 6'3". I'm a tall woman, I guess, 5'8". I believe is above an average height for a woman. So I know they're going to be tall men. Mm-hmm. And I know they're going to be tall boys. But I know that also reads very quickly in our larger society as a man. Even 12-year-old boys, you can see in their little faces, they're boys, they're babies. But to someone, they read as a threat and aggressive men, and they're interact with them as such. And I look at the same child, and I can't see why they don't see a child in that baby's face. And that's the part that I struggle a lot. Because I can see a child in anyone else's baby, regardless of their skin and hair texture. And I just don't understand why that doesn't translate for the larger society. And that's the part. When does that shift happen? And I know those conversations will have to ramp up in both context and frequency when that threshold happens. And for us, it will likely happen sooner than I would like.
Yeah. And I think I could resonate almost everything you just said, so my beautiful boy is 6'3", 6'4". He's very tall. He's very fair, and something in the way I educated him, something empowered him to think he's invincible, right? So nothing can happen to me. Oh, Mom, you need to stop talking about this. Is not going to happen to me. This is never going to happen to me. And I go back and I sit back and, sometimes I try to talk to him about this, but I don't want to engineer his mind to have fear, right? I don't want him to have this thought that, I need to be afraid of everything. But many mothers have sent their children, Trayvon Martin, to the store to get some Skittles. Or, there's so many instances of this where a Black man, and I want to say something about the hoodie too. Hoodies are very popular with boys. Boys love hoodies, and I don't know what it is, but they love hoodies. So it kind of, hides some of your face, but there's enough that somebody can recognize that you're Black or white or blue, green, or whatever color you are. And, for my son, he's always telling me, Mom, you worry too much. Mom, you worry too much. And, when I go through the list of names of Black men and brown men and boys who have been killed for simply existing, they've been talking a lot about the young fella who was walking back from the store after he went to get a sweet tea. What you just said about looking in your boy's face and seeing it. So this man didn't look threatening by there was nothing about him that looked threatening. He was small, he was, polite. He responded in kind, and he died. So the world that we live in is so unbalanced that, the analogy you gave about the traffic lights. Well, every parent has to have their kid, that conversation with their kids, across the street, make sure you look both ways, and all that kind of stuff. That's not a race conversation. That's just a general life conversation. We all have to have that. But when you're a Black or brown parent, you add a layer of something to that adds concern for you. And either your children are going to accept and see and recognize what you're saying to them, or they're going to go the exact opposite way and say, Mom, you're worrying too much. But that doesn't stop you as a mother from being in complete fear for the safety of your children. And the fact that white people became aware that this was happening when Mr. Floyd was killed is mind-boggling to me, because this has been going on for ever. So why is this time different than it is before? And for all of those Black mothers that belong to that club of dead sons, their pain, I don't even know how you process. I can't even wrap my mind around somebody killing my child for any infraction. If he's done something wrong, they have laws and places you can deal with it. But to kill him because he's not responding the way you think he should respond or doing. That's the thing that is always in the back of my mind, and unlike you, you're still a baby. I'm old, so how much longer am I going to live? And how do I ensure my son gets to his American dream? How do I ensure that he safely makes it to his American dream? The same for my daughter. How did she make it to her American dream safely? And in a society that sees skin color and hair texture, the size of your nose and your lips and your hips as some kind of thing that makes you different is beyond absurd. I don't think I ever told you this, but when I worked at UNC Chapel Hill, my office was just under the coroner's office for the state of North Carolina. And so very, very nice white man. And he would, often bring me upstairs to fix a problem, but he also would show me cadavers and things that he was working on and all this stuff. And I'll never forget, he called me up there one day, and he called in with such urgency. I thought his computer had gone down because he was the coroner for the whole state, right? So he's got all the stuff he's got to. So I'm running up the stairs. I get up the stairs, and he says, Rochelle. He didn't let me in the door first. He just stood right there, and he put his arms on my shoulder. He said, Rochelle, I want you to see something. And he said, this might help you understand race. And I said, okay. So I walked in, and it was somebody laying on a table. They were dead, and they were blacker than the blackest thing you could see. I mean, just literally black, no hair at all. And he said, what do you think this is? I said, a black man, black woman, I don't know. He said, this is a white woman who had been dead in her house for 3 months and no one found her. And when he said that to me, it was almost like this bell went off in my head that what's on the outside of us have nothing to do with what's on the inside of us. And that we make so much difference about skin color that we're stuck as a world where we're disliking each other for the most unrealistic thing, I mean, my hair could fall out, my skin color could get lighter or darker, whatever it is. And you're going to hate me for that? You're going to kill me for that? I don't know. And to me, when I think about that, it's just such an unrealistic thought process. And you have two boys. I only have one. Hello, Akua?
Yeah, I lost, I think my internet did something weird.
Thank you.
But okay, so when Mitchell was born, I've had this conversation with my sister recently. I remember telling her, because I was the first out of the two of us to have kids, and I remember sitting and holding him, try not to get emotional here, and being very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I'm a spiritual person, so, but I remember being very overwhelmed by some unknown emotion. And at the time, I really thought it was just motherhood and all the beauty that provides, because it does. And this overwhelming wave of emotion and love that comes in, and you never realize you can love a person this deeply in this particular way. Later, and feeling a sense of responsibility I never felt before. And with that, fear immediate was that next reaction, because I know the world and how vulnerable this little person was. Well, he was never really that little, but this little person was.
Never that little.
No. 10 pounds, both of them coming in the world, cheeks and the whole thing. So, and long. But how vulnerable this person I loved that I was holding, almost an extension of my own heart, now outside of my body, now vulnerable. Someone can touch you, just mere idea that someone else might touch you with dirty hands would send me, reeling. But knowing that it wasn't just about germs, that wasn't my only concern. It was how the world would see you, and the world wouldn't see you the way I see you. Mm-hmm. And thus somehow put you in danger. Almost took me out of here, Rochelle. that was a struggle, and I really had to pray about it. And I had to pack some of those emotions in certain compartments because all of them together, I just couldn't handle it. And then having Parker, another beautiful being coming into the world, another little boy who'd be a tall, handsome, smart, intelligent, charismatic man. I could see them both as men. And knowing that they'd be out here in this world that I already know so much about was a heavy, heavy thing. And so working through those emotions, this is way before any Trayvon Martin. This is before our current events, and it's a heavy thing. And so as we continue to go through, I'm just hopeful, prayerful, and all, and willing to do the work I can to have the tough conversations to ensure that these boys are okay. Because that's a lot.
It really is.
It's a lot. Sorry.
It's right, all right. Believe me, I understand. Wait till the first day they leave your house to go to college. That day is going to be the day that unrattles you more than anything else. Because when the first time my son left my driveway, you know, we moved him into this dorm and all that stuff. But the first time he came home and left my driveway, I think I had a small nervous breakdown. Because I could not imagine this child, because I could protect him in my cocoon. I could make sure he's good in my nest. But now he's in the whole world.
Yes.
And he's theirs. He belongs to them and they belong to him.
Yes.
That day, you know, every time he left the house, I would cry. And I'd have to come and lay down. I have to get in the ball and lay myself in the ball and cry. You know, and I think what you expressed is exactly what we all know, right? We all know that there's this fear that our children are vulnerable in a way beyond their normal things, right? So don't get hit crossing the street, you know, don't play with fire, you know, all of those kinds of things, you know, the things that most normal people have to talk about. But you have to tell your children that because of how you look, you could be in danger, you know, and no matter what action you take, you know, we go back to that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. This man is laying on the ground, face down, handcuffed, and somebody's got their knee on his neck and his hand in his pockets. And this man says, I can't breathe. And then he starts calling for his dead mother. Yeah. I mean, I can't even wrap my mind around how that's possible. I can't wrap my mind around how that's happened so many times. How many black men have you seen shot in the back running away? And a lot of my husband's friends and, you know, his fraternity have police officers in there, you know, and I ask a lot of them, I've had chats with them, what mechanism makes deadly force the first reaction? You know, and a lot of them have said, you know, it's training and things of that nature, but really, I mean, an aside, I hate slugs, I hate earthworms, I hate anything that wiggles when it moves, right? So I'm not afraid of snakes or any of that, but just something about those things but I couldn't even imagine killing one of them. You know, I couldn't even imagine killing something that grosses me out to the nth degree. I couldn't even imagine killing that. And that you could take someone's life and you did. And you don't get to come back. You're gone. So I'm sorry. I did not mean to make this sad for you, but I mean,
no.
You know, I think that, you know, as I said, I'm quite a bit older than you, and, you know, my son will be 22 this year. My son will be 22 years old this year. Crazy. And, you know, just like you, my little 6 pound, 5 inches, 5 pound, 6.5 pound baby, 21 inch long man is taller than me and his father. He's bulkier than me and his father. And he's absolutely the most beautiful specimen I've ever seen on the whole planet. I'm his mother. You know, there's nothing like it. You know, it's nothing like it that something could happen to my child. My daughter looks a lot like you. You know, I mean, in almost all the characteristics, she's a lot beautiful woman, brilliant. That something could happen to her. And what she experiences in the workforce, what she experiences in her interactions, makes me so uncertain about the future. You know, people have said, oh, well, you know, we have hope now. We have hope. We've had hope forever. We've hoped. You know, what is the change going to be? And everybody says, well, we need to strike while the iron is hot, this moment in time. What is the moment in time exactly? That one more black man died? Because 3 weeks after Mr. Floyd died, they shot a black man in Atlanta. 2 Spelman and Morehouse children are riding in their car to get some food, and they're tased prayerfully, and thank God they weren't killed. But that's the world that we live in. So if you were upset about Mr. Floyd, how could there be in Atlanta? How could that happen in Atlanta? You know, how do we have black men hanging from trees? How is that possible? So you got your work cut out for you, girlfriend.
Well, it's on that front, and you know, advocacy at that level. I've got friends that are really in the trenches doing that work that I haven't quite tapped into as much, but I am recognized, speaking of technology, that technology has played a large part in the conversations we're now having, because believe it or not, just having a little phone on a little camera on a phone dispersed in the society, you know, the poorest of us usually have some device to record that we did not have 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And I think that having these devices are somehow helping us shine a light and making folks a little bit more accountable, because it doesn't provide the coverage and the shade for people to fall under and pretend that they don't know and don't see. And that's the only reason why I believe that we might be at a point where we can shift more than we have been able to shift before, because before it was just us. Therefore, it sounded like complaints. It sounded like cries, wolf cries, as it were. Now it's the cries. It's also evidence. And now the folks who would have normally fallen under that cover of I don't know, I don't see, don't have that anymore. And it now pulls at their own conscience, because you can't say, well, I haven't seen it. In my community, police are nice. Well, that's just your community. Leave your community and see what police presence might look like in someone else's. It looks more like a police state over there versus a community support for, you know, rule and law. Completely different experiences. And somehow technology has played a large part in opening folks' eyes to seeing beyond their own communities. And so, speaking of your work in technology, you guys are, the innovation around technology and how we're using technology, I think, may play a huge role in this fight.
I think you're right. But I'll leave you with this. You know, my work, I have seen it evolve over the years. What's coming in the next few decades may do more harm to us than anything that slavery ever did. Because now as you're driving down the street, the police can scan in their cruisers, they have something that scans your license plate and it says who you are, puts up a face of a black or brown person, white person, whatever kind of person, they can do that. Where you live, the amount of crime and poverty means living there is going to cost you more, because automation has said, I'm going to take this algorithm and I'm going to make this, and this is who you are. We talked a little bit about facial recognition. All of these things are coming. And there's a report by McKinsey. They do a lot of research and things like that. And it's called The Future of Work. They said 30 to 40% of jobs done by a person can be automated. And you get Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, right? So the father who's got the job, you know, fixing and doing all these things has now been replaced by a machine, and he's gone. The good story of Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, when the machine broke, they had to hire him back to fix the machine. But how much of a reality is that for us? Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, my darling, for talking with me. I hope I see you before I turn 80, you know, but you know, this virus is a bit much. And I hope you all are safe, and your family and everyone as well. So thank you very much for chatting with me. When this video convert, I'll send you a link and
Okay.
tell me whether I can upload it or not.
Yeah, my hair is in place.
Oh my God, really? You know, I'm so over that. I've done so many of these, and you know, I haven't been to a hairdresser since probably February. I don't care anymore. I'm like, okay, this is what I look like. If you have a problem with my hair, I'm sorry for you. That's your problem, because I'm all right with it. It works for me. So
No, I'm good too.
thank you,
Same.
darling. I appreciate this
Good to
very
see
much.
you.
Thank you.
And
Bye
chat.
bye.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.